Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Jeff Gerstmann Show. I am your host for this week's installment of the broadcast. My name is Jeff Gerstmann. Hi. Welcome in. It's a weird week this week. We are about an hour out, if you're watching live, from Gamescom's Opening Night Live from Germany, where games will be announced and or discussed in some form. That'll be a 2-hour broadcast. So if you're watching live, a little program note here. We're gonna do the podcast for a chunk of time here, and then we're gonna watch this thing together, and then after that we'll podcast some more. So strap in for that. If you're not watching live, then the Gamescom broadcast will be a separate video on YouTube. If you want to watch that, then you know you can check that out separately from the podcast. Video games. I've been doing video games. Ask me anything about video games. Concord is out in about 3 minutes. So I have Concord installed, but I have not been able to play it because they did not they did not put the servers up early for reviewers. Take that as you will. I don't know. But yes, that's out in a few minutes here. So I haven't played it since the beta. I'm curious to check it out. I mean, what will this week's cutscene be? We have to know. Will the robot have a funny joke for the guy that looks vaguely like Michael Rooker? Or rather like Michael Rooker's character from Guardians of the Galaxy? Will that? We have to know. We have to know where we land on the Sweatstrom. So yeah, I don't know. I am looking forward to seeing how that all happens. You know, how that all does. You gotta kind of at least give it to them. They are at least launching new intellectual properties in an era when that is so few and far between. I don't know that this one seems. I don't know that I necessarily care for the characters from what I've seen of that end of the thing so far, but the shooting was fine when they were running their beta. So again, it's there's a lot of curiosity, at least on my part, to see if this thing gets its hooks in enough people to kind of make it, and how that all goes. I don't know. Like right now, is right now the right time for a competitive shooter like that? It's kind of the downward swing of the annual Call of Duty cycle, but also they are in the ramp up for their beta is going to happen soon. So excitement for Call of Duty is about to kind of probably start taking off even more. Yeah, you've got Marvel Rivals on the Marvel Rivals. It's not a difficult game name to say, but the way it rolls out sometimes sounds wrong to the ear. Marvel Rivals. It's like Libble Rabble. It's a modern day Libble. If you haven't played Marvel Rivals, it's a modern day Libble Rabble. So yes, yes. Also, it's a modern day Double Dribble. They should have the Double Dribble voice say what Marvel Rivals. Like, what was even the name of the game I was talking about? About Marvel Rivals. They should have that when you fire the game up, whenever that does finally come out. I'm assuming they're gonna. That's why it's not out yet. Is that they're recording. They're trying to digitize the voice and get all that stuff set up. It takes time. I have been so I can't. I don't. There's not really much more I can say about it other than what I'm about to say about it. Is I've been playing Star Wars Outlaws, so I'll have more to say about that next week, soonish, and and that's I think that's literally it. So yeah, I have been playing that. I have not been playing Black Myth Wukong, I did not, for whatever reason, did not end up getting a copy of that. I put in a request for one, but was told that they didn't have any left, which with Steam keys is always weird. But sometimes that happens. You know, PR firms get a limited number and blah 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 blah. But yeah, I don't know that. Hey, look, there's news to talk about with that one as well. So why don't we take a very brief break? We'll come back. We'll talk about Black Myth Wukong and Indiana Jones on the PS5 and all this other news-related stuff. Hold tight. Food. No matter how much you might try, you still have to eat. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you're doing. You're occasionally going to have to slow down and be like, okay, all right, I got to get some food in me. But who has time, right? Who has time for food? And when you do, you know, when you make food fast, it's often junk. But Factor is here to make healthy, quick food a reality. These meals are never frozen. They're fresh, they're dietitian approved, and they're ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you're always going to have time to enjoy a nutritious, great tasting meal. They've got a lot of options at Factor. A lot of options. 35 different meals and over 60 add-ons to choose from every single week. So you'll always have new flavors to explore. This is great. You know, if you've got goals, they've got a variety of different types of meals for you. Calorie smart meals, protein plus. If you're doing keto, they got meals that will fit that too. From breakfast, easy for you to, whoa. From breakfast to dessert, stay fueled up with easy, nutritious options. That's right, you can get these restaurant quality meals with premium ingredients. We're talking like filet mignon, shrimp, blackened salmon. Kitchen time is kept to a minimum. That's right, like I said, just 2 minutes. You know, no shopping, prepping, cooking, cleaning up. It's just, you know, it's a box. You keep it in your fridge. It shows up nice and fresh. You put it in the fridge until you're ready. It's effortless. You got 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meats, eat well balanced, you know, whatever your specific food needs are, Factor has your back. And it's time to get in on this. Head to factormeals.com/JeffG50 and use the code JeffG50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code JeffG50 at factormeals.com/JeffG50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Wow. 50. It's time for the news. 50. I got a button for that. Hang on. Black Myth Wukong. For whatever reason, I keep calling it Blacksmith Wukong, which maybe that's a side game where you're making weapons for the Monkey King, or, you know, for fake Goku, whatever the hell is going on in this thing. The game came out yesterday, and they did like a worldwide unlock time, which I imagine is probably helpful for this. But they have broken single player Steam records for day one with over 2 million concurrent users. That is according to, you know, Steam metrics and also gamesindustry.biz, who is collating this sort of information. They've passed the peak of Pal World with it. Why? Does anyone know why? Okay, so I feel like we've seen a lot of trailers for Black Myth Wukong over the last year or whatever the hell is happening. And the trailers have all looked okay. The reviews are hitting and they seem like, let's call it like a mixed range of positive, I guess I would say. You know, people are like, hey, this looks really nice, but maybe, you know, it's kind of like, hey, this, you know, maybe just boss fight after boss fight, and maybe it's a little bland, you know, like the reviews have not necessarily been falling all over themselves over this thing. Everyone in chat just keeps typing China. Yeah, China finally found something to care about. It's Black Myth Wukong. and yelling at feminists. Like, yeah. So the other part of this fucking insane, like, what the? All right. Here's another games industry .biz headline. Black Myth Wukong demands influencers don't mention, quote, feminist propaganda in coverage. And their subhead is, players are also forbidden to discuss China's game industry policies. This is an interesting one. So this kind of happened over the weekend, and there was a little bit of confusion because this was a I guess a PR firm or marketing company that was working on behalf of the publisher and developer of the game, a company called Game Science, which IGN did some looking into some of the people at Game Science and found some pretty gross stuff there on their, you know, that they've been up to. So on top of that, this company Hero Games, that has been in the employ of Game Science for, I guess, promoting the game, distributed some copies of the game to influencers. And this wasn't just China. There was I believe there was some people in France that received this. It was kind of an uneven rollout in terms of like who received this, but it sounds like the keys were not like early access, like review keys. They were like, here's a key for the game that will work when the game comes out, and also here's a list of things you cannot talk about if you're going to play the game. It's a list of do's and don'ts, which is hilarious because the only thing on the do list is do enjoy the game. And then the don't list is like, don't discuss politics, violence, nudity, feminist propaganda, fetishization, or other content that instigates negative discourse. Players were also, this is according to gamesindustry.biz, and you know, this like I said, this has been going around. This is a lot of people have been reporting on this list. Players were also forbidden to use trigger words like quarantine, isolation, or COVID-19, and to avoid discussing content related to China's game industry policies, opinions, news, etc. Thanks, China. Can you believe? Of course you can believe this, because it's China. But the part where they fucked up is they sent it to a lot of people outside of China. Like, if this was sent to people in China that were going to cover the game or wanted copies of the game, you'd be like, well, China. You would have an opinion about China's game industry policies by going, I guess, you know, hey, fucking China, right? Yeah, I guess don't talk about Winnie the Pooh while you're playing Blacksmith Wukong. You know, someone's going to be, you know, or whatever, right? But instead they are they have sent this to a much wider audience of people that are like, are you fucking high? What? But yes, this is stuff that didn't, as far as, you know, the people that have been looking into this a lot, you know, like this didn't go to people in the United States that were reviewing the game, like the US PR firm responsible for the game. Those people are seasoned pros. They know better than to send any fucking insane shit like this out. But this Hero Games company, that I guess, you know, maybe did the outreach for influencers, you know, maybe everywhere but the U.S. But I don't know if anyone in the United States actually got this list or not. It seems like it's a, you know, it's not a full worldwide rollout of this insane bullshit. I guess, you know, if you not talking about politics probably then includes like, is Taiwan a country or not, right? That I assume that's something that they would assume falls under politics, if not violence. And so it's a really wild. I mean, yay. Games come with lists sometimes about like, hey, don't spoil the game. Here's a list of spoilers in the story that you should not discuss. And people that are doing influencer work are probably used to seeing things that are a little bit more than that, because sometimes in those relationships, that's when you get into the like, hey, don't say anything negative about the game. You're here in a promotional capacity. You've been hired, you know, like, and theoretically these influencers are getting paid as part of a paid marketing campaign if they're going to be restricted in those types of ways. But this just sounds like this Hero Games company just like was like, yeah, I don't know, just fucking send it to everybody and tell them not to fucking talk shit. Or what? You're not going to get the next game from Game Science in 9 years or whenever they ship another game? Like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen if you get into it? So it's a really bizarre one. It's one of those situations where you're just like, hey, here's a company that doesn't understand how the worldwide video game market works, and they sent this shit out wide. Stuff that, like, again, I feel like if this was just sent out to people in China that were going to cover the game, you would look at it and go like, yeah, what the fuck, right? Am I right? But by virtue of them sending it a little bit more widely, it's like, oh, you people are fucking crazy. What are you even talking about? Trying to enforce this insane bullshit. So yeah, I don't know. That has kind of been what has been happening lately, and that dovetails nicely with some of the coverage that IGN, you know, like the idea that they're out there saying don't talk about feminist propaganda. The co-founder of Game Science, this is again, IGN has a much longer, more detailed look at this. Like they did some much deeper focus on this a while back. This is not a new story. Like they uncovered this kind of a while ago. But the games industry business kind of throws in at the end here. In 2013, studio co-founder and lead artist Yang Shi, and my pronunciation's probably bad, wrote a lengthy Weibo post saying games for men and women differ due to biological differences. There's just a bunch of like weird bullshit out there from people at that studio and some of the way that studio's been run and all of that kind of on top of this. That then to have this come out alongside it, that's like, hey, don't talk about violence or ladies, or don't talk about women maybe having rights, is fucking perfect. You nailed it. Perfect rollout, everybody. But hey, 2 million people playing it on Steam. Are they all real people? Are they all people inside China? Again, I don't know why this is happening. This game, whenever they've shown a trailer for it, I feel like the reaction to it that I've seen, whether it's been in a live chat or kind of looking at it online, has been people going like, oh yeah, I'm interested in checking that out. But like, I don't understand why 2 million people would be playing this thing. Is it just there's a lull and there's not another release out? Like, that game looks fine. It looks like kind of a, you know, hey, here's kind of a Souls-light, Soulsy kind of knockoff thing that is like, again, like I said, the reviews out there have been mixed positive, I would say, of like people like, yeah, it looks good, but it's got some issues. Yeah, so I don't know what to make of that. I've got it installed. I guess at some point I will play some of it. I don't know. Like watching the trailers, I've looked at it and been like, okay. I'm not super. I don't know that I would call myself super interested in it either way, but I do want to give it a look. Mostly because there's not a lot of other stuff out right now, I guess. But whatever, I've got a lot of other stuff. I actually do have a number of games that I'm busy playing at the moment. One of the games we're going to hear about here at the top of the hour is going to be Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. That is going to be part of the Gamescom Opening Night Live presentation. I believe that Xbox is going to allow people to play that if they're in Germany. And see it for themselves. There's been a fresh round of reports about the Indiana Jones game coming to PlayStation 5 next year. This is according to... This is all, yeah. People need to come up with better names. I don't know. Video Games Chronicle is saying that the current round is being traced back to someone named Nate the Hate Why would you? All right, whatever. But basically, that the upshot of this is that it is looking to be a timed exclusive, and that it will come to PlayStation 5 in the first half of 2025. Which, again, if you remember, The Verge was claiming this months and months and months ago. And it kind of got shot down just by virtue of like it not being part of the initial announcements of their kind of like quote unquote multi-platform strategy. But at the time, you know, I think when we were kind of speculating under the guise of all of this stuff being, you know, real or whatever, that, hey, this is a licensed game. This game was originally in development before Microsoft came in and bought ZeniMax and Bethesda and Machine Games, the developer, and all of that stuff, and that they're kind of looking at this as you know, and if you take that in conjunction with, they said that they're taking their multi-platform strategy as sort of a case-by-case basis, where they look at games that have been out on Xbox for a number of months or time or however long, and then figure out when it's going to make the jump somewhere else. Disney, you know, is probably going to be some kind of factor here. They did have to renegotiate part of this deal when Xbox stepped in and bought those studios, but I think the safe assumption there is that, yeah, of course, this is eventually going to come to more platforms. It's a licensed game. Disney did this deal based on it being a multi-platform licensed game. They're going to want to try to get as much of that money as possible, so Disney is going to probably be all for it. Unless Microsoft can kind of make up the back end to make the deal work for them. And so I'm just going to guess here that, like, yeah, a lot of the stuff that, you know, was talked about back when all of this multi-platform mess started, that a lot of this stuff just became back burner type stuff that, you know, they didn't have to announce at the time. But of course, they're always going to be looking. It's a question they will probably ask about every single game that they ever publish. And if they don't ask it at launch, they'll ask it a year later. Like, hey, should we bring this? Should we bring this somewhere else? Should we bring this to multiple platforms? Like, they're a business. Of course, there's going to be someone there that's going to eventually ask that question, and they will do the math on it and figure it out. You know, that's not crazy. That's just fucking science, man. So yeah, I expect that, like, I'll put it to you this way. Even if this report is wrong now, if we give it enough time, this report will eventually be right. You know what I mean? Like, even if it's not a first half 2025 thing, because that might be kind of a fast turnaround. Because the game is yes, I guess it is also claimed that the game is going to launch on Xbox and PC in December. And so if they launch in December and then 6 months later put it out on PlayStation, that might be a little bit of a tight fit. Based on some of the stuff they've had to say about what their multi-platform strategy is, they could always fall back on, like, well, this deal was in the works before we bought the studio and blah, blah. There's a million ways that they could get out of it if they did want to do this thing 6 months later. I think it chips away a little bit at their credibility if they knocked it out that quickly, after saying, like, hey, we're not gonna necessarily knock them out that quickly. But yeah, this just makes sense. I don't know. But that's probably not something we're going to hear about today, right? That's not going to be something that, like, they're going to probably get into prior to the launch of the Xbox version. It's probably a situation where the Xbox version will come out, it will launch on Game Pass, it'll be on PC, they will have some chunk of time, and then I'm guessing that they will eventually say, hey, by the way, remember that Indiana Jones game that people liked and or didn't like? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it does. We're bringing it to PlayStation. Why not? Why not? Speaking of why not, hey, why not? Atari is going to make a new Atari 7800. Why not? This is called the Atari 7800 Plus. It is, they are going to make new wireless versions of the Atari 7800 controller. They will connect to this thing. Much like the original 7800, this will also play Atari 2600 games. It is called the Atari 7800 Plus. It will launch later this year for, I believe, yes, $129.99. They're taking pre-orders for it now. It will take original cartridges. So, okay. Do you remember the Atari 2600 Plus? I did a video on it. It came out, was it earlier this year? It was they remade the Atari 2600 and it took original cartridges and they put out some new cartridges and all of that other stuff. The Atari 2600 Plus also played Atari 7800 games. So, as far as I can tell, except for the controller, except for them making a new 7800 controller, which is, they should do that, but also the 7800 controller is a weird, hilarious thing. This has to just be the exact same innards as the 2600 Plus, but with, but in a 7800 shell. And they're shipping wireless controllers. That's like the new thing. And those wireless controllers, I believe, will work with the 2600 Plus, if I'm not mistaken. And they are going to sell some new cartridges for it, which is cool. But yeah, they sold this already. I'm guessing that this is the exact same hardware, just in a shell that looks like a 7800 instead of a 2600. I would rather have something that looks like the 2600. No one has fond memory. Like, look, you might think you do. No one has fond memories of the Atari 7800. You might say, oh yeah, the 7800, sure. Ninja Golf. You might go, yeah, yay, the Atari 7800, why not? But you're not out there going like, the Atari 7800 was a factor and it was a major. No, it wasn't. I knew one person that owned one, and it was like, I remember seeing it in a closet at one point and being like, oh, you have one of these? Is it any good? And then like the response was basically laughter. At this point, the Genesis was out. It was, like years later, so you wouldn't have it hooked up anyway. But the 7800 is ridiculous. It was a bad device. At no point did they go like, hey, what if we made the sound better? Like, that was the thing. They were like, oh yeah, we're Atari. We could license this thing Nintendo made and bring it to the United States. I guess we could do that. No, we have the Atari 7800. We're good. Dog, you were not good. You were not good at all. I would much rather have, I would much rather have a 5200, even if the 5200 controllers are straight trash. I would much rather have one of those and that game library than the nonsense that came out of the 7800. That said, it plays all the 2600 games. That's cool. They are shipping some new games for it. So these are kind of like, in some cases, new homebrew games or games that were already pre-existing that they're going to now sell on cartridge, such as Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest, which sounds like it will come with the device when you buy it. Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest is a relatively new homebrew game for the 7800. Bentley Bear, you may remember as the star of Crystal Castles, a fantastic video game. That never came home in a satisfactory manner because it was a trackball game and all of that other stuff. So, Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest is a side-scroller like platformer a la Mario. Like, you're getting effectively, I believe this is now that it's being published by Atari, that makes it official. I believe this is now the third game with Bentley Bear in it, because he showed up in Atari carts on the Jaguar. And so yeah, if you're exactly. If you're into the Great Gianna Sisters, you'll love Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest. I did play some Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest because again, it's a homebrew game that has been around for years. It's good for what it is for a 7800 game trying to be like a Mario style thing. Like it's cool. It's cool. It's awesome that they're going to make that into a cartridge. They're also going to make some, they have like one homebrew author that I guess is a prominent name in the scene, if you believe what Atari is saying about it, producing either enhanced versions of or new ports of games to the 7800 in like kind of a cool way. Bounty Bob Strikes Back is another one of the games they are selling for this. It's going to come with 10 new levels, which is pretty wild. It's doing an updated version of Asteroids called Asteroids Deluxe, weirdly enough. As well as new versions of Berserk, Frenzy, Space Duel, and more. They're also, I believe they're also releasing some new Atari 2600 carts alongside the launch of this, including a multi-cart that has, I believe, all of the real sports games on it, which is kind of cool. That 2600 plus was cool. So I, like the idea that they're going to like properly issue some of these 7800 games, I think that's rad. And if you happen to have nostalgia for the specific form factor of the 7800, they're making a device for you. To me, the idea of buying one of these when the 2600 plus is right there, looks like an Atari 2600, and also plays 7800 games, seems kind of silly. But do you, I suppose. Whatever. I might, maybe you just want to buy one of the controllers or something. You could have a USB Atari 7800 controller, like a real fucking sicko. That'll be out later this year. That's cool. It's cool. I don't know. I like that Atari is doing all this stuff. Even if this one seems, like I said, it seems a little bit superfluous, just because their description of the hardware seems to match the last thing they shipped. So that's sort of weird. IGN is reporting. I forgot that this even happened, but this is something that Meta, the Facebook people, are saying. What is this? This came from the official MetaQuest VR YouTube account. Apparently, so at some point they announced that they were going to make GTA San Andreas in virtual reality, that they were going to do some kind of remake of that game in VR. That was like 3 years ago. I completely forgot this happened. But now, like the YouTube account, I guess people are commenting on trailers in a Skate 4-like manner. They're commenting on other VR game trailers to say, "Hey, what the hell's going on with San Andreas?" And the official account has responded, "GTA San Andreas is on hold indefinitely while we both focus on other projects. We look forward to working with our friends at Rockstar in the future." Tell it to the people that thought Agent was going to come out. That ain't never going to happen at this point. Though when they announced it, I guess IGN goes on to say that it was announced in October of 2021, no footage or anything like that. But they did describe GTA San Andreas VR as a project many years in the making. Which seems, I guess, you probably had to sit at a table. Probably had to have a lot of meals with people to try to get that deal over the line. And then at some point, everyone realized, oh, we don't want to do this. Oh, this is not going to move the needle for anyone. So this isn't VR is cold to the point where this is not going to do anything for us. So we're not hot for it anymore. Rockstar obviously has much bigger fish to fry these days. I don't know. It's not weird that this is off. Or rather, delayed indefinitely. Speaking of something that'll probably never happen. Hollywood Reporter is reporting Hollywood is going to make a movie based on Sega's hottest video game property, Eternal Champions. What the fuck is wrong with this is there's a level of desperation. Like, don't. We've got to tap into we've got the gamers have money. They spend $70 on, they spend $100 on a game just to play it 3 days early. Clearly they've got enough money to go see a movie. The franchise scribe. Oh man. Okay. I'm going to read Eurogamer's recap of the Hollywood Reporter story, because whenever I read people writing in like Hollywood trade language, it just I get hackles. And then they get raised, and then this doesn't feel good. Derek Connolly, the writer of the Jurassic World trilogy, is set to write the screenplay for this supposed live action adaptation of the 1993 Sega fighting game for Genesis, or Sega CD if you're in the deep water. Eternal Champions. No one wants this. No one is coming to this and going like, yes, Eternal Champions is back, finally. But like, what must it cost to license this franchise? $9, right? Like, they coughed up $9 and got the option to Eternal Champions, and then this guy's going to write a treatment for it, and then someone's going to go like, yeah, we're not doing that. Like, what? We're not. No, of course not. This is Skydance is doing this as well. There are producers attached. David Ellison, Dana Goldberg, and Don Granger will produce for Skydance. And Toru Nakahara will oversee production on the Sega side, which he was credited as doing that for the Sonic films. So it sounds like that's just his role, is just like, I'm the movie guy. The Benny Man in chat asks, is this more crazy than a Twisted Metal TV show, though? Yes! Twisted Metal had like 5 or 6 games. At one point, it was viewed as like one of the PlayStation's biggest franchises. People loved Twisted Metal. People cared about the lore of Twisted Metal. No one is going like, Eternal Champions is good, but where it gets really great is when they made that Game Gear game about the guy in the fucking trench coat. Chicago Syndicate, whatever the fuck it was. That's where the Eternal Champions lore gets deep. There's nothing to, it's I think it's like another generic like story, fighting game story of like, we've fighters from around the time stream have been summoned together to fucking fight, and they murder each other. Like, it's the same story as Quake 3. Where's my Quake 3 movie? I want a CG fucking orb hopping around with a rocket launcher strapped to it. Like, well, let's make fucking good movies instead of bad ones. Huh? People seem to like the Twisted Metal TV show as well, but there is a lot more meat on the bone and a lot more like nostalgic interest in Twisted Metal than there ever was for Eternal Champions. I was there before Eternal Champions was released. I saw demos of them going like, yeah, here's the Sega CD version, and we put FMV fatalities into it. I was there. No one gave a shit. We're just like, this is what? Okay. Like, it was at a time when the fighting game glut felt real. That point in the 90s where like, you're like, okay, all right, Weapon Lord, sure, I guess. Oh, you got Dave Winstead. Well, okay, you got someone from Capcom working on Weapon Lord. Okay, there's ideas here. Like, at least there was that. Eternal Champions, man. And the Sega CD game was a better game than the Genesis version of the game, because it was sort of a Champion Edition style situation where when they put it out on Sega CD, they were like, we're going to fix some of the stupid shit that we'd put into the Genesis game. Some of the weird limitations we put on special moves and whatever else. Like, they corrected things a bit, but at no point was Eternal Champions ever a good game. Never. At no point was I like, man, I'm really looking forward to Eternal Champions. At most, I was like, well, when that Sega CD game comes out, I'll watch these fatalities. But like, I wasn't going out of my way to watch time killers or bloodstorm finishers. It was just like, who fucking cares, man? Legion's Arcade in the chat says, might as well adapt Clay Fighters next. Like, yeah, Clay Fighters would be a better property than this. Because at least there's like, you could make a garbage, like you could make a bad Clay Fighter thing and people who weren't aware that Clay Fighter was a video game would still go like, I don't know, it's like a claymation movie and Frosty the Snowman's fighting a bootleg Elvis. But they have to save the world because it's a movie and there's got to be stakes somewhere. It can't just be a clay fighting tournament. This is fucking insane. You have to wonder, like, will the reaction, will there be some kind of course correction for video game movies after the performance of Borderlands? Because, Sonic the Hedgehog doing well in theaters started leading to more situations where people were like, oh, well, we gotta get out there and license more video games. We've got to make this happen. And so Sega has multiple times over the years licensed or optioned or whatever a bunch of their properties for movies. There was a pitch for Crazy Taxi not that long ago, right? So like it's not the first time they've done this. Crazy Taxi would be a potentially better movie than like whatever the hell Eternal Champions would be. Because with Eternal Champions, you just get like generic martial. If you just fucking want to make a whatever ass martial arts movie, yeah, sure. Eternal Champions, why not? You could do it. Nothing's stopping you. There's I would maybe even count myself in this demographic of people that be like, well, I don't know. A lot of movies are bad, but I did like Bloodsport, and so, the Mortal Kombat movie, the first one, was not a good movie, but if you're telling me you're making a movie about a martial arts tournament, then I might watch it. That's the most you could get out of this. And at that point, the Eternal Champions branding brings you nothing other than disgust. That's not a curiosity. That's not, ooh, I want to see what they did with the Eternal Champions license. That's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why would you? Oh, gross. You're out of your mind. For some further details about Tango Gameworks came out. This is about what I figured. Some people were trying to claim that every single person moved over, and like, no. Enough time has passed that that's definitely not the case. IGN is reporting. I'm sorry. This is Steven Totillo reporting on Twitter, I guess. Still posting to Twitter, huh? All right. Well, I guess I'm posting live links to Twitter. But about 50 of the 100 members of Tango Gameworks have made the move. If you remember, the Krafton, the PUBG people, have purchased the studio and the rights to the Hi-Fi Rush intellectual property. So they are presumably going to be making more Hi-Fi Rush games at some point down the line. But about half the staff, 50 of 100 of the Tango Gameworks staff, made the move or stuck with it through the transition. And so now we know that it was about half of them. So there was a mod coming out for Modern Warfare Remastered, which is the remake of Call of Duty 4 that came out, I believe, back in 2017. And it was a decent little, like, it was laden with microtransactions and skins, and it was at that era of Call of Duty where they're just like, what if you could open boxes and get a zillion different skins for this? But it was a pretty decent remake of Call of Duty 4. That you could buy separately, but also originally it came with Infinite. Was that Infinite Warfare? Was that year's game? Anyway, if you bought the expensive version of Infinite Warfare, I think it came with Modern Warfare Remastered, but they sold separately on PC especially. Someone got it in their head, hey, why don't we mod this to include the maps and gameplay of Modern Warfare 2? The old one, not the... That's only mostly confusing. And so they set out to work on a mod that eventually became known as H2M. Has to mouth, I assume that stands for. I have no idea. And they were getting ready to release it. They put out a trailer saying, "Hey, this thing is coming soon," and it looked cool. You're like, "Oh, very, very nice. I would like to play it." Yeah, that Modern Warfare remaster was a good engine to do this on, and yeah. So if they're gonna remake those Modern Warfare 2 maps and insert them into this in some way, shape, or form, that would be cool. I would like to try that. And so, of course, Activision shut it down. They sent a cease and desist and shut down the mod completely. And by completely, I mean you can go download it right now somewhere. Someone leaked the files, and I believe you can play it right now if you wanted to. But the official state of it is that it is shut down and is not going to see any further updates and is not going to get an official release or anything of that nature. The developer of the mod, known as Watchful Wolf, decided to share the reasoning that they thought that Activision had for blocking it. This comes to us from Eurogamer. Essentially, because of the popularity H2M was gaining and how close it is to Black Ops 6 releasing, and kind of the marketing and the beta and stuff for that, they did not want H2M interfering with possible sales of Black Ops 6. That's just, that is how their interpretation of the cease and desist and their kind of guess, their estimate as to why it got shut down, which, yeah, of course. Yes. You got it in one. Don't announce. Okay, look. If you are going to release a thing where your thing is, hey, we're using a bunch of maps that Activision made, and we're going to use their content and distribute their content for a mod for a game, don't pre-announce it. If your mod is going to be 100% your code, 100% your everything, and you've got a legal leg to stand on, and you're like, nope, we made all of this originally, this is not based on anyone else's stuff, this is our own thing, then you're good to go. But if you're going to come out and say, hey, we took Activision's maps and made them for this new thing, yeah, they're going to shut you down. Did you play the Aliens TC for Doom before it got foxed? You got foxed, son. Don't pre-announce this stuff. Just put it out. Don't generate hype for your mod that uses copyrighted assets. What do you think's gonna happen? I mean, it would have come out and then got shut down anyway, right? But at least you would have been able to have your rollout and been like, hey, I worked on this thing and here it is, and then it would get shut down. But yeah, your thing had their stuff in it. It's a simple, yeah. Did you think they were just going to be like, yeah, that's cool? We are talking about Activision here. The company that could have released this game on their own if they wanted to and didn't. But whatever, that thing looks awesome. And like I said, the files are floating around out there. Be careful, because now that it's not an official release, who knows what the fuck you're downloading. It's a disaster. Be very careful out there. And don't download. Stop all the downloading, I guess is what I'm saying here. Okay, if you're watching live, we're going to get ready and we're going to swap over to the Gamescom broadcast here very quickly. They're going to go in about 15 minutes here. But let's talk about the rest of the news here real quick. Valve has confirmed that it is going to support the ROG Ally with SteamOS, with the Steam Deck operating system. This comes to us via The Verge and also via the preview versions of SteamOS that have mentioned the ROG, the ROG Swift Ally, the Republic of Gamers issued their little handheld thing that I bought one of those, and then it got super hot and it ejected my micro SD card because the heat caused the port to expand or squeeze it out or whatever. It was a real piece of shit. It was one of the most disappointing. It was just like, this thing sucks, man. And so I returned it. They have since issued another one, the ROG Ally X or whatever they're calling it. Presumably, they have found a way to prevent that problem. They didn't go out of their way to talk about fixing that problem. They were just like, here's a new one. It's fancy. Okay. Anyway, running Windows on a handheld like that kind of sucks because Windows was not made to do that. The process of using the ROG Ally's built-in, like, whatever, Armory Crate software was a miserable experience. That thing was absolute trash on the software side. And it dissuaded me from wanting to use Windows on any one of these devices until Windows decides to directly support a more handheld-friendly thing. And if you're in the insider ring on Windows or the Xbox gaming ring of Windows, there is a compact mode for the game bar that is designed to help with that ever so slightly. I messed with it a little bit here on a desktop and was like, oh, this doesn't actually solve the problem, but it is probably slightly better. So they are chipping away at this, I suppose. Also, there are updated Windows or like a more fully featured set of Windows drivers available for the Steam Deck itself. So they are preparing for a future where you may be able to dual boot, or if you just, wanted to install Windows on it full time, and, deal with all the problems I just mentioned, then hey, you could do that as well. But the dual boot scenario gets you around the anti-cheat games that don't run on Linux. So that would be Call of Duty, Destiny 2. Those are my two big ones. Those are games that I would play on a Steam Deck more if I could, but I can't, so I won't. And those would be that would be nice to have, I would say. But yeah, if you want to run Windows natively on one of these devices, Valve is understanding of that, and they are, it's there's a quote here that they have that The Verge has from Lawrence Yang, who's the designer at Valve. Says, as for Windows, we're preparing to make the remaining Windows drivers for the Steam Deck OLED available. You might have seen that we are prepping firmware for the Bluetooth driver. There's no update on the timing for dual boot support. It's still a priority, but we haven't been able to get to it just yet. So yeah, more movement in that space, even if, we're not seeing like massive hardware changes and all that stuff. Like the Valve is continuing to chip away on the software side of that thing and improve that space in ways that are pretty cool. I don't know that I want to dual boot Windows on a Steam Deck. I maybe I would mess with that. But I guess I would have the hard drive space for it on it. Maybe. I don't know that I want to play Call of Duty or Destiny 2 that badly to jump through those hoops. The Steam Deck already does just about everything else that I want it to do. Like play Mario's Picross for the Game Boy, which I got all the retro achievements in finally last night while the baby was not sleeping. She's got teeth. She's got teeth coming in. She's got all this. There's a lot happening other than sleep. And so I was sitting here at 3 a.m. playing Mario's Picross and going like, man, wow. Our last story. Adam Boyes, maybe you've heard of him. Former Beefy Media executive, former EA Canada, Capcom, PlayStation. The man who brought you the Sour Patch Kids game, or also the Sour Patch Kids music video with Method Man. A legend in the field, one might say. Most recently, he has been one of the co-CEOs of Iron Galaxy Studios. He has announced that he will be departing that role by the end of this year. He's going to be there for, oversee whether it's transition or whatever. But he was co-CEO alongside Chelsea Blasco. And then one Dave Lang, who founded the studio, will continue to have founded the studio, but Chelsea will be becoming the sole CEO, according to GamesIndustry.biz. He wrote a blog post thanking Dave Lang for trusting me to push the boundaries of what Iron Galaxy could accomplish. And also thanked Chelsea. Thank you for teaching me so much about building a strong culture. Iron Galaxy is in the best possible hands with you as their sole CEO. Very much looking forward to seeing what one Adam Boyes does next. Stay tuned, I suppose, for that. And congratulations. That's going to do it for the news. And we are going to take a break here. If you're listening to the archive of the podcast, it will be a break, and then we'll come back and do some emails and all that other stuff. But if you're watching live, it's Gamescom time. Hold tight. And we're back. If you are not, we're not joining us live, the Gamescom Opening Night Live broadcast just happened. And we're back from that level, from that batch of announcements. I'm just going to say this in case you haven't seen any of the news out of Gamescom yet, that those people put Peter Molyneux on a stage and he announced a new video game. I know, right? Masters of Albion is the name of that. That right? Yes. Masters of Albion is the name of the game. It is up on Steam for wish listing or whatever. And it is a god game where you can go down and control any one of the characters in a behind the back third person combat sort of scenario. Didn't really show a whole lot of it, but you are moving a creepy looking hand around and using it to design buildings and make stuff. And, so it is kind of a Peter Molyneux style god game while also letting you control things a little bit more directly in a way that we'll call Fable-like, even though really it was just behind the back third person stuff. I don't know that we have seen quite enough of it to call it Fable-like. Showed you being able to kind of make things in a lot of different ways and slapping things together, everything from houses to swords. In a trademark bit of humor, they made a sword with bread for a blade. It didn't work very well. Didn't see any chickens. Don't know if you can kick any of those chickens or what, but hey. I'll put it to you this way. This is, I think, what I said while the broadcast was happening. The game looked, and it was described as being worked on by about 20 people. The game looked attainable by us. It looked like a solid small team game. The assets were not it wasn't some big 4K fidelity, the craziest looking thing you've ever seen. Zoom all the way out, zoom all the way in. Like it looked like I'm not going to call it modest because I think that maybe sells it short, but it looked like an indie god game. And you look at it and you go like, yeah, they could make this. Absolutely. A team of people could definitely make this thing and finish it and ship it in this state. Like no part of it looked like something that was like smoke and mirrors that wasn't going to happen. And, like Peter Molyneux, in case you've forgotten, because it has been a while, Peter Molyneux, kind of, creator of Populous and I guess Syndicate, a lot of games over the black and white, Fable, became known for saying things about his games while they were in development that never came to pass, and largely became transitioned at some point from like, hey, here's this creator of legendary games that the world loves, like Populous. Everyone loves Populous. Syndicate is an amazing product. Like, the games on this man's resume are in some cases like amazing genre founding games. And I think people forget that he has had an incredible career because he spent a lot of time getting game journalists to sign a wall to say, no, Fable the Journey is not on rails, or reviewing fart apps with hooligans on the internet, things that are unbecoming of a legendary game. But more importantly, he became known as like the guy who demoed Milo for the Kinect and the guy that told you all of these things that were going to be in some of his games that, you know, never came to pass. And became known as a guy who overpromises and in some cases very much under-delivers. And that is, you know, it is tarnished his career in an almost unremovable fashion. The curiosity, what's in the cube? You know, the kid clicked on the cube, he found the thing that was in the cube, and he was entitled to a share of the profits in Goddess, a game that apparently made zero profits because that guy never got anything. Though having played Goddess, I'll tell you, I believe it. That game probably didn't make them a dime. But Masters of Albion, hey, we'll see. It's a game he's been working on for a few years, again with a small team. VideoGamesChronicle.com is reporting that Mark Healy, who was one of the heads of Media Molecule, is also working on this game, and that other ex-Fable devs are on it, and that the game is self-funded. We'll see. Like I said, it looks like a game that could very much be created and finished. No part of it. He did not say anything on that stage that was just like outlandish and crazy. But you know, there's still time. I guess I should say there's still time for something completely insane to come out of that man's mouth now that he's back on the scene. New Mafia game was announced. They've been saying as much for a long time that there was a new Mafia in the works. I think they've been they had to get out there and say that they were doing it because they were hiring up, right? It is called Mafia: The Old Country, set in the 1900s Sicily. The formations of the Mafia. I'm not a big Mafia, like, I don't mean the video games, I mean like Mafia as a concept, as a fictional or a real as a thing. It's not, I don't have a great deal of interest in it where it's just like you say, hey, we're making a Mafia thing. I'm like, ooh, I love the Mafia. I love organized criminals. It's not. I don't have like a huge love for that as a genre, especially when they talk about the old country and talk about Sicily and all of this other stuff. Like when it is like, hey man, it's the 20s and Prohibition and we've got fucking guns and here's Elliot Ness. If we're talking about the Untouchables, if we're talking about guys that look good wearing hats, like a hat squad of some kind. But in Mafia times, then you know, maybe I'm on board. But when we talk about the mob, you know, we talk about Goodfellas. When we talk about Casino, we talk about Casino, really. Hey, can we just talk about Casino? Now, there's a goddamn movie. I'll take Casino over Goodfellas, personally. And not a lot of people always feel that way, but I would take Casino over Goodfellas 8 goddamn days a week. A classic film. From a classic era in film, I suppose. I mean, Casino is no Heat. Not that Heat is about organized crime. But as a lover of cowboy scores, let me tell you, someone should have made a video game about Heat. More directly than Payday ever was. But what are you going to do? Anyway, they are going to show more of Mafia: The Old Country in December. It was a very short thing. It was really just a logo more than anything else. Nate in chat asks, wasn't there a canceled Heat game? Yes, Gearbox at one point was intending to make a game based on Heat. Over the years, as we've seen more of Gearbox, I've been like, maybe that's okay that they didn't get to make that one. But it was a long time ago. It was a different Gearbox for sure. Speaking of Gearbox, the show opened with the formal announcement of Borderlands 4, and said that it would be out next year. Very teasery trailer kind of thing. Nothing to it really. I bet in some world they thought that this was going to go differently. And we're like, man, the movie's going to come out, and then boom, we're announcing Borderlands 4, and then boom, boom, boom. Or I guess maybe, what if the opposite was true? And they were not necessarily intending to have Borderlands 4 be announced so soon, and they were like, we have got to move on from this movie. Oh my God, it is a noose around our neck. 2K is like, we just bought this fucking thing, and oh my God, there's a turd hanging off it now. And I'm not talking about Borderlands 3. Oh boy. So they went ahead and formally announced Borderlands 4, which they said as much, you know, between earnings calls and Randy Pitchford on social media, like they have been doing it. SSJ Oates asks, was that movie in theaters or was that a Netflix thing? They'd put that film into theaters, but it sounds like it's going to appear digitally in about 10 days. That has not been formally confirmed, but there's been enough stuff popping up saying that, like, hey, by the way, Borderlands 3 is going to be out for streaming on the 30th because, oh, shit. Which I guess is how the movie business is these days. Either those movies do well in theaters and then they do well in theaters for a good long time, or they don't and they just try to bury it immediately and go, nope, put it out, just get it out there, let's make all our money on this immediately. Oh god. So yeah, I don't know, that felt like a decent show. The Gamescom Opening Night live broadcast, one thing from earlier in the podcast that proved to be wrong, I guess, but wrong but right. This Nate the Hate gentleman was right. Specifically, I'm not. But there was a leak about Indiana Jones coming to PS5 in the first half of 2025, prior to the show, and that was confirmed for spring 25 on PS5 and a December release date for Xbox and PC. That's a pretty fast turnaround, but as I said earlier, there's nothing that seems like even if that wasn't true at one point, that would be true eventually, and that would eventually come to PS5 because it's a license, because Disney wants money, because the game was the deal for the game was done before Microsoft bought the studio, as far as I know. So like all of that stuff, like that game coming to PS5 makes a ton of sense for like business reasons. Where I was wrong is that I was like, well, there's no way they're going to announce that until after the game has come out on Xbox. They're not going to get out there and say, by the way, it's coming to PS5 in spring. But they did exactly that. They said, oh yeah, this game's coming out December for Xbox and PC, and by the way, it's coming to PS5 in spring. Tim Dog's ship has sailed, so I imagine that the what is left of the Xbox faithful is like, I told you so, or they're just like shrugging and going whatever. But yes, I thought that they wouldn't do that because they want to sell and sell Game Pass, and they want to do all the stuff that they they don't want. They want people that are on the fence about a device to go, oh, well, I'll get it on Xbox. But instead they said, no, you could get the other one and you can still play it in spring, I guess. And I suppose there are plenty of ways where that path makes sense as well. But I don't know. I thought that they would have held off and waited until January or something to say, by the way, Indiana Jones is coming out on the PlayStation 5. But there you go. What else? They showed the Diablo 4 expansion. I don't know, man. There's, Honkai Star Rail was there, and they showed a little bit of Terry Bogard in Street Fighter, which looks incredible, and I'm very excited about it. That's looking real good. There was a pretty lengthy segment on Dune Awakening, which I guess I just am always mixing up the Dune games at some point, and I thought that Dune I thought that game was a 4X game, but I guess that's Spice Wars. Anyway, this game looked more MMO-like, and I kept finding myself thinking about Anarchy Online while looking at it be played, which I don't know what that says about me, other than my brain is broken, but also it sounds like that's who's making it, right? It is literally Funcom making it, so there you go. Anarchy Online was the first MMO I ever played. And Anarchy Online was never a great game, but it was cool. Sort of. Yeah, I'll put it to you this way. It was a science fiction game in a world where a lot of MMOs were just, here's some more fantasy shit. And that was attractive at the time. And so I played an agent, and it was every bit the MMO of just like, you had a gun, and it was like seeing guns in an MMO and the way that the turn-based combat worked and all of that other stuff was always just fucking weird. Because you'd hit the button and he'd put the rifle up to his face and then he'd go boom, and then it would just say miss, or it would say whatever, and it was just always, it just never did the thing. You never felt connected to the combat. But that's MMOs of that era for sure, right? I mean, you're swinging swords, dice are being rolled in the background, and through server latency, numbers eventually pop off of the enemies, and you go like, oh, okay, I hit him for 300. Cool, I guess. And that was that. Gosh, what else? They showed Arc Raiders again, which the trailer felt a lot more somber and kind of, I don't know. I remember thinking, man, Arc Raiders, that looks really cool when they first announced it. And they did say that, like, oh, it's been a long time and there's been some changes, and I don't know. So I don't know how much of that is here in this, but that trailer didn't really do anything at all for me, for whatever that's worth. A Dying Light spin-off. They showed the next piece of Persona 3 DLC. They showed Black Ops 6, complete with digital Bill Clinton. And a big, a senator, you're blackmailing a senator with a sex tape because you need a picture of his retina to get through a security door. And it looked like one of those bigger kind of open, crazier missions that the games have had more recently. And then Bill Clinton was there as well. But no, you're not blackmailing Clinton. That would be very good if they did that. Maybe, I don't know. No, it wouldn't. I don't know. The Monica Lewinsky stuff is very, when we think about the way that got covered and the way that got handled, it was very gross, the way that she was dragged through the mud for whatever role she had in that situation, right? I mean, it's anyway. Yeah, I don't know. Borderlands was announced for 2025, and looking at the end of the trailer here, it looks like they only confirmed it for current consoles. So if you were sitting there thinking, in 2025, will we still be getting PS4 games? I'm going to say the answer is maybe, but they at least did not necessarily announce Borderlands 4 as being one of those games, or whatever that's worth. Yeah, I don't know. I guess now the start of Gamescom happens. I don't know what other kind of news we'll have out of the show per se. If there's going to be a lot of stuff there that was not a part of this broadcast. Obviously, some companies will have lineups, and Microsoft is saying that they have a lot of games there. So I'm sure that you will see hands-on reports about some of those games and all of that from people who were there on the floor. And yes, and like I said, I am going to go see Indiana Jones and some other stuff, I believe, at some point here in the relatively near future. So I will have something to say about that myself, I suppose. And yeah. And that was Germany, I guess. We'll see. Yeah. Maybe it'll just be a zillion hands-on reports about all the farming simulators and other games that didn't make their way into the broadcast that are probably still going to be there in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, that Batman VR game that Camouflage is working on was shown. Marvel Rivals got a release date for later this year. Yeah, and that was Gamescom. Why don't we get into some emails here? Podcast@guard.bike is the email address. Send me an email right now. No. And I will read it, and I will put it into some sort of thing here, and we'll check them out here. John from Philadelphia writes and says, one thing that caught me by surprise this week was the incredibly reasonable PC system requirements for Dragon Age Veilguard, which did also get a release date announcement of Halloween. The minimum requirements mentioned the GTX 970, a graphics card that was released a decade ago. Do you think that these lower than expected requirements may be the result of BioWare and EA targeting the Switch 2 launch with this game? Similarly, are some of the last-gen ports that have been occurring recently, such as Jedi Survivor getting an Xbox One and PS4 version, also a sign of publishers stocking the cupboard for the next Nintendo system? I don't necessarily think that these are going to be big signs of the Switch follow-up. More so than the engines that these games are running on were often in some and Frostbite specifically for Dragon Age, I believe, is an older engine that was built a generation ago and can be made to support that sort of stuff. So I think what we're seeing, again, if we go back to the Steam hardware survey and try to use that as something of a guide, a loose guide if nothing else, of where PC specs are at in the real world. It's foolish for developers to target high-end PC hardware because, one, that if you targeted the highest end PC hardware, your console versions would not run well at all on any platform, PS5 or otherwise. You would have to scale down for that. But more importantly, it's about selling as many copies of a game as you can and targeting as many different. You want a maximum addressable audience. So you want your game to run on. If you can get your game to run on a 970, do it, man. Because that's going to ensure a wide range of users being able to play your game. And so I think that's why you end up seeing some of these PS4 and Xbox games as well, obviously, because those systems have large the PS4 anyway, large install bases of players that have not upgraded. And so we saw that in the Sony numbers recently that hey, a lot of PSN usage is still happening on the PS4. The PS4 is still very much an active platform. And so these companies that are in the business of making money and can't just afford to cut off all of those users are sitting there and saying, well, we're going to put Jedi Survivor on the Xbox One and PS4 because we can and because there are people that are still there that will potentially buy that game. And so, I think all of those things are related. And so why do you make a game that targets a 970 or a minimum as min spec? For the same reason that World of Warcraft still looks like shit, even when they update it. For the same reason that Counter-Strike, you look at it, even CS2 to a certain extent, you're like, this could look better. It's because you want players to play those games. It's why all the effects in Valorant look like dog shit. At least that was always my assumption, is they're like, oh, we want people in Asian gaming cafes where the PCs are super old and fucked to be able to play our game. That was always one of the targets as well. As you'll hear in the The PC bongs, they don't have 4090s. So if you want people to play your thing, that's why. But yeah, that's why you have games that are like, you know, they want to run on. But I remember that at the time. I remember when Valorant first came out and it's going, wow, this looks like shit. Why does this look so bad? And remembering like, oh, it's because they want this to be a massive competitive game. And so they want to be able to have this thing run on as many personal computers as possible. And they did it. And people seem to like Valorant. Bewildering, I know. But here we are. JP from Maryland writes in, I'm watching the 1998 film Enemy of the State. Good work. Which uses an NEC Turbo Express as a prop for a video gadget. I read a little bit about it, and it sounds like it was a huge flop. So I'm curious, have you ever used one? What were your impressions? Was it good for anything other than being a random piece of tech in a movie? The Turbo Express was cool for the same reason the Nomad was cool. It was a portable version of a full-fledged console. You know, the Turbo Express could play the same games that your TurboGrafx could. And so you could take your HuCard games with you on the go. But it was super expensive. And I believe, like the Nomad, burned through batteries like nobody's business. Was it good for anything other than being a random piece of tech in a movie? So they sold a TV tuner for it with an antenna, and you could pull the antenna up and watch TV on your Turbo Express. My favorite thing that I have ever seen a Turbo Express used for, and I know I'm pretty sure I've told this story. I was on a flight back from CES, and so this had to be either 92, 93, or 94, because those were the only years when CES mattered. I was with one Ryan McDonald, who I would work with for years at GameSpot, and this was before there was a GameSpot, but we were coming back on the plane, and he had a Turbo Express, because of course he did. And he had it out, and he had the TV tuner plugged in. And then I believe the TV tuner had like either a coax jack or AV, like it had like some kind of input capability of some kind, because he had it hooked up to his video camera, his 8mm, his high 8 or whatever. And he had taken that camera into a movie theater and pointed it at Pulp Fiction and filmed Pulp Fiction. And so here he is on the plane coming back with his Turbo Express watching Pulp Fiction. And I think the guy next to him in the seat, his eyes fell out of his skull because he was like, what are you doing? How are you doing that? That's Pulp Fiction. Like that movie had just come out, or, you know, it was not, you know, was not available at home video at the time. And so that is, when I think about the Turbo Express, that is what I think about. So it was good for that. I don't know. You know, you could play, I don't know what, Bonk 2. You could play single player Bomberman. I mean, it had a link cable that you could use to link to other Turbo Expresses in case you knew other weirdos in your world that had that thing. And link cable it all together. Cody in Orange County writes in, it says, with Borderlands heading to streaming around 3 weeks post theater release, it seems like a great contender for the worst video game movie ever, especially considering that it had a solid budget and a celebrity cast. You mentioned that you haven't seen it yet, but what do you consider the worst video game movies you have watched? There's a lot of bad, but what are the top contenders that Borderlands will have to knock off? No, dude. Like, okay, so I have not seen Borderlands, so I kind of have to like guess a little bit here, but there's no fucking way that movie is worse than like Postal or Double Dragon, or just like so many of the Uwe Boll movies, like Mortal Kombat Armageddon. Are you telling me this Borderlands movie is worse than Mortal Kombat motherfucking Armageddon? That's a hard thing to believe. Or you know, but yeah, can Borderlands be the worst video game movie in a world where Blood Rain exists? Or that Dead or Alive movie, which I love, but also, come on. There's just, yeah, in a world where that House of the Dead movie came out, it's impossible for me to believe that Borderlands is somehow the worst video game movie. You know? People in the chat who have seen both Borderlands and House of the Dead are saying Borderlands is better. So, take that for what it's worth. But yeah, so in terms of it having a budget and a cast and all that sort of stuff, sure. Yeah, that's probably that probably ratchets up the failure rate or whatever there. But how much does that really count for at the end of the day? Leiden in the Netherlands. I'm sorry. Hidde in Leiden in the Netherlands. Multiple layers of things for me to mispronounce here. Writes in about Majestic. Is the world ready for another ARG game like Majestic? Majestic, if you don't remember, EA published Majestic. It was I guess I would call it a web browser game. Majestic was something that was like it was meant to be like they connected it to AOL Instant Messenger. You could give it a fax machine number, you could give it your phone number, and you could tie all of these things together. And basically it was an episodic game where once a month you would start getting instant messages from someone or scary pre-recorded phone calls. Where like you would be somehow roped into a big spy thing, and oh my god, you've got to help these spies. They're contacting you, Jumping Jack Flash style, and you are Whoopi Goldberg, and you've got to save these people or solve puzzles for them. And so you would basically go and solve puzzles. You would look at their fake websites. Sometimes there was a thing where you had to like help someone navigate through security cameras, and it was like this big browser-based thing that was just fucking broken, but it was awesome. There was nothing like it. And basically you would get roped into this story and try to save these spies, try to help these spies do whatever the hell it was they were doing. That is all lost. I don't remember anything about the actual story of it. Anyway, moving on with the rest of the question here. I feel like developers have learned a lot from the past 2 decades of ARGs, and it seems like the kind of thing that's ripe for a revival. APIs for sending text messages, placing phone calls, and push notifications are available to anyone. So why don't we see more novelty ARGs like this? Even my elderly grandmother has tried an escape room at this point, so the public seems more prepared for this type of experience than ever. Sure. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you could, and I'm sure that there have been more, actual ARGs that have been, Majestic wasn't really an ARG per se. I guess it sort of was, but I don't know. It was a game. You subscribed to it. You subscribed to Majestic, or you bought the episodes, or whatever. And it was really neat, but it was episodic. And so you would play through the thing and you would finish the episode, and then the entire game would go dark for like 4 weeks or 6 weeks or however long it was until the next episode was ready. And then you would get a random new text message that would start it back up. And also it always felt like they inserted artificial time into it as well, where they're like, I'll contact you tomorrow. And then you're like, no, I don't have time to play this tomorrow. I have time to play it today. So what the fuck? And so there was just a lot of logistics around the way we play games that didn't really fit with that for a lot of people. It was really awesome. I think they eventually sold it on a CD-ROM that you could play offline, and they made their own fake AOL Instant Messenger equivalent so that you could play through the story and see the stuff. It was really neat at the time, but it was like a live game, you know. But they didn't feel ready for it. Like a lot of episodic video games, they did not feel ready to meet the pace of the average player. Because that was the kind of the complaint I kept hearing about it, was people would be like, yeah, I finished the fucking thing, and now there's nothing. And now that it's like it left off in a way that like this game going dark for this many weeks feels weird and like unrealistic. And, you know, there are ways to write the game in such ways that, you know, would make that work better. And they tried with what they had. I mean, it didn't last for very long. It was I think they originally, the season was supposed to be like 6 episodes. But I'm not sure if they ever finished it. I in my head, I want to say that they were scheduled to do 6 episodes and ended up doing 4 or something like that, and that they didn't ever quite finish it out. But I can't remember the exact way that it all rolled out. I just remember being very disappointed at the end of it, and feeling like, oh, okay, they kind of pulled the plug on this thing, and well, here we are, I guess. But sure, yeah, Majestic as an inspiration for a thing, you know, you could, if you wanted to go the route of pulling in a bunch of AI chatbots and stuff like that, because they did, you know, they would respond. You would write to them on AOL Instant Messenger, and they would respond to you. So there was some very rudimentary text parsing happening. And for years, those accounts would stay online on AOL Instant Messenger, and you would see them. And you could send them a message from time to time, and you'd never get anything back because they were just the Majestic bots. But yes, I do think there are things to be learned from Majestic if you wanted to do that type of game in this day and age. The technology for that sort of stuff has gotten a lot better in a way that you don't have to rely on phone calls, because no one answers their phone anymore. Right? So that would never really work. Complord is asking what my ICQ number is. I don't have it memorized anymore because I had 2. I had one that was like a 6-digit number, a really low one. And then I lost access to that account, and I had to register again years later, and ended up getting some monstrosity. I was a Trillion user. I used, you know, I used AOL Instant Messenger and ICQ, and I guess, you know, whatever else Trillion could connect to. But Trillion was a multi-service messaging app that you could use to log into ICQ, AOL, and like, you know, 3 other things. I was paying for Trillion Pro at one point. That's how much I believed in the concept. It was awesome. When Trillion went away, it was the end of an era. Discord's not the same. No one will ever understand that Discord is not, it's not, Discord is not like, you hung on AOL Instant Messenger messages in a way that like Discord does not replicate. Text messaging even doesn't, like, which wasn't really a thing then. Just not the same. Not the same. I like Discord a lot, but it's not an instant messenger replacement. And yeah. When I finally bought a Mac, I used Adium for years as well. James from London writes in and says, why do you think so many people from the UK write into the show and love what you do? Well, thank you, I guess. Everyone in old Blighty. I think it's because the live version of the podcast airs early enough that people in the United Kingdom can still enjoy it. Or maybe I'm like a really good, like, you know, like fake American or whatever, you know, like the same way that like I I always wanted to be American for money in Japan. I always wanted to just be like the big dumb American guy on Japanese TV that just went okay and then like ate a hamburger. You know, maybe I'm that for the UK. I don't. Maybe I'm. I don't know. Jeremy from Chicago writes in, I've heard you scoff at the existence of the PlayStation share button a few times now, and I can't disagree more. I don't consider myself a casual player in the least, and my ability to quickly take a screenshot of an awesome moment or save a video clip, trim it up, and throw it on YouTube is one of the best features of the last 10 years of owning a PlayStation. Also, with the new app, the PS5 will auto-upload all your captures, so you can quickly open the app and see all your images and clips and save them to your phone, allowing us to share them whenever we see fit. You say you do this for a living and you think it's a waste of controller space. 99% of players do not have their consoles connected to capture cards. We're not all Twitch streamers and industry professionals. These share features give us the ability to capture these moments and make them incredibly accessible. I think it's one of the best things to happen to console gaming, and I would be incredibly disappointed to see that button removed, and many of my friends feel the same. Okay. I don't use my capture card to store moments in games either. I don't, like, when I want to record something, I record something, and when I don't want to record something, I don't record something. So I am never a person that's like, I've got to save this moment that just happened in this game. Like, that's not a thing I do in any part of my life, like professionally, personally, anything. I don't have a need for that. Also, the other thing is I had to disconnect the PS5 from my capture hardware because all of this capture hardware fucking sucks. Actually, that's not true. The capture hardware, Elgato makes decent capture cards. They're not what they need to be just yet. It's all these splitters and stuff that I got to hook up to try to hook multiple devices up to the capture card and still have it route back out to the TV and to a monitor here. My specific needs for a capture setup are currently seemingly fucking impossible. Buying a lot of shady ass Chinese HDMI boxes that never maintain sync, and they just, you know, every time I turn on the PS5 over the last month, it would just like blink out and come back over and over again. And you're like, this is fucked. I can't do this. And so finally I just hooked the PS5 up directly to its own HDMI port. And I guess if I need to capture anything, I'll bypass all those splitters and just run it right into the capture card, and I don't know. But if I do that, I won't have audio. Fuck. What the fuck am I going to fucking do? God damn it. Capturing console games sucks, man. It's a cursed, it's so much cursed hardware involved to try to do it right. Have you tried Tat W says, have you tried an HDMI matrix instead of a splitter or switcher? Yes, but no one makes a 4-in, 2-out that can do 4K 120 HDR and all the other stuff that the console can do when hooked up directly. So I used to have that exact setup, but to do that with with modern consoles, you have to turn a bunch of stuff off, whether that's HDR or whatever. And what I want is a zero-touch solution. I want to be able to hook everything up and just be like, all right, cool, this shit just works. And I can, whether I'm playing games just to play games or playing games because I have to capture some footage or I'm streaming or whatever, I just want it all to fucking work. And apparently that is just too much to ask right now. With more and more games supporting 120 hertz on console. And so like, I want to know what that looks like on my TV. I paid good money for this TV that can do that. I want to see what that looks like. And so if I'm running it through a capture box that automatically busts that down to 60 and won't even let me stream, like play it at 120 for my own satisfaction, then that's me not seeing these consoles at their fullest potential. And or seeing glitches that only occur at 120 hertz if that's the situation, right? So it's kind of a, like, professionally, I should know that stuff. You know? But HDMI sucks, and HDMI 2.1 is a nightmare as well. It's a nightmare across the board. Quentin in Tacoma writes in and says, what do you remember about the reaction to Doom 64 not appearing on PC back in the day? Were PC gamers upset? Did people even want to play Doom on consoles? I don't remember anyone giving a shit about Doom 64 having a unique campaign or anything like that. At most, it was like a interesting, like, oh, huh. But I don't remember like PC, like, you know, keep in mind that by the time Doom 64 came out, which was 1997, this is, you know, the same year Quake 2 came out. So the idea of, like, no one cared about Doom. Everyone cares about Doom again, and that Doom 1 and 2 thing that they just put out and upgraded everyone to is really cool. And they did put that, and I think the Doom 64 campaign is in that now, or not. Maybe they did. I thought they did put Doom 64 out in some capacity on PC at some point, didn't they? Yeah, it's in there. It is in there. Right, Quake 64 is in Quake. That was the thing I was thinking of with some of these recent releases. And then, yes, Doom 64 they put out as a separate thing alongside, like, what, Doom 3 or something, right? Anyway, Doom Eternal? Oh, right, okay. That's what it was. So that was like the first time it was available on not the N64, except for people that remade the game and all this other stuff. So, you know, there were some people that were weird and probably did their remakes in Doom 2 and tried to make it happen. But no one cared about Doom in 1997. People care about it now in a nostalgic sort of way. But that was in that lull where it was not old enough to be cool old. It was just old. And so no one gave a shit. It was, you know, I think I reviewed that version. Like, I remember it being like okay, but it was still even this feeling of just like, really, Doom. We're gonna go back and play more Doom. I'm over here downloading Quake 2 skins. I am playing Rocket Arena 2 right now. I don't have time to play fucking Doom. All right, buddy. So, it was not that interesting. And Quake 3 was, you know, a couple years away, and, you know, Unreal would come along somewhere in the middle of all that stuff. And, you know, so the shooter options and stuff on the PC, there were plenty. No one was standing around going like, I can't believe that those console kids got their own special Doom. No one cared. By that point, people that were playing Doom had played so many fucking hot WADs. They had downloaded so many of the hottest WADs around that even if you liked Doom for years after its release, you were doomed out a little bit. Waz writes in and says, and asks about internet radio in games. Remember when internet radio exploded in the early 2000s and everyone collectively agreed that Soma FM was pretty fucking good? Why do you think internet radio as a feature in video games never caught on? And Soma's, I don't know, it's all right. Connect to my Icecast server if you want the fucking real shit. No, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, sure. Like, they could do a deal with some of these streaming stations to say, hey, we'll put your streaming station in our game and people can opt to listen to it if they want to in the cars in GTA or whatever. Like, they could have done it, and I don't think that would have cost money because they're just playing a broadcast of the station and they're handling the money end of it. So, like, I imagine Rockstar would not have to pay for that. I know, yeah, like American Truck Simulator have like some of that stuff built in. Or is it built in or is it a mod? Either way, I know American truckers and Euro truckers are doing some cool, weird shit with streaming audio. I think it never caught on, especially in the early 2000s, because it was dicey. It was not something that was fully legal yet. It just seemed like a really weird thing. You're like, I don't know if this is going to be around tomorrow, let alone, 2 years from now to be a streaming station in this. So and the legality of it was maybe in question to the point where if you were a video game maker thinking about that sort of stuff, you maybe would not have thought to put that in there. Also, people would still have data usage caps in some situations that they might not want to spend on, streaming radio stations in games. And the early 2000s were a really dicey, weird time for internet radio and also consoles on the internet, because we're talking about the early 2000s. It was the Dreamcast. Eventually, the PS2 would have its network adapter moment in 2001, 2. And so it just wasn't enough of a thing at the time. And also, like I said, I think some of these stations existed outside the US and just weren't really thought of as legal. Like I assume that at this point, you're like digitally imported or Soma FM or some of these stations that have been around for years and years and years and years. I assume that they figured out the legal end of this to a degree that they're allowed to offer it worldwide and make it all work. But at the time, I don't remember it being that cut and dry, that it was like, oh, here's this thing and it's real and it's here. And it was more just like, if you open up this, did you know if you click this weird button in Winamp, it'll show you a bunch of fucking radio stations? Glenn Rubenstein decided to run his own shoutcast station for a while. And I think if I had the bandwidth for it, I would have considered doing something stupid like that, but I never had the time for it. But yeah, yes, there's no reason why they couldn't do that, especially in this day and age. But yeah, I just don't think the interest is especially there. The modern day equivalent of that is when a game supports Spotify, but now that now that the consoles themselves can just kind of do that directly, it's not really, it's not really a thing. A Twitch DJ stream. No, I think if I was going to stream music, I would do it on Mixler, because the impression I get is that Mixler don't give a fuck. That's not video, obviously, but that's fine. Let's see here. We kind of answered that question about previous generation consoles still getting games. All right, maybe this is our last question here. Nate from Tacoma writes in, number 1 in Tacoma, baby. Being born in 1992, I missed much of the arcade scene of the 90s, including the heyday of the beat-em-up genre. My closest exposure being the Sunset Riders machine at my local pizza place. I decided to pick up the Capcom beat-em-up bundle in a Steam sale, and having now played through some games regarded as genre classics such as Final Fight, I can safely say I don't get it. The games largely boil down to simply holding forward and mashing attack, with some of them literally only having one attack button to fight off waves of the same 4 or 5 enemy types ad nauseum, with boss fights being the only significant breaks from the repetition. Is there something I'm missing, or was this genre a time and place kind of thing, being replaced by genres like character action that take the same concepts but significantly deepen them? So you're not wrong. I mean, a lot of the strategy in these games boil down to you pushing up or down to make sure you're not aligned with the enemy as they're attacking. And that's it. It's the belt scroller of that era. I think a lot. I tend to agree that I think a lot of those games are very straightforward, but the difficulty comes down to you're being attacked by multiple enemies. When do you stop your combo to stun another guy before he can hit you? Like crowd management in that game becomes the task at hand. I am a big believer in this genre having a time and place, because when games like Fighting Force started coming out and trying to like revitalize the beat 'em up genre, I think a lot of those games are miserable. Even if some of these games are fun and, you know, kind of a nostalgic sort of thing, they ran their course and the genre kind of vanished for a while, you know, where you kind of got into the polygonal era and you saw like Dynamite Deca or Die Hard Arcade and like that sort of stuff. But also then, yeah, you kind of got into the Fighting Force and this other stuff, like seeing games try to modernize the genre and make it polygonal, and make it a little more open, and you're walking a different way, the way the Fighting Force did, and all that. I think that stuff sucked, and I think that the genre kind of died in a way, or it morphed into something else. I think a lot of the beat 'em up ideas, you know, kind of turned in, whether that turned into character action, or you could argue that the Dynasty Warriors games have a lineage there of some kind, but those games feel so different that I don't really consider them to be the same thing. Urban Chaos was a decent game in terms of like trying to modernize the genre a little bit and trying to bring something else to it. Like they kind of or not Urban Rain, not Urban Chaos, Urban Rain, whatever game Mucky Foot developed for the PlayStation 1. Mucky Foot. But yeah, Urban Rain was that was a PS2 game, right? So you end up with games dotted across the landscape of the PS1 and PS2 that you could try to drag back and say, no, this is a game that is trying to modernize this. This is a game that's trying to modernize this style of game. But people got sick of those games. They became quarter munchers, right? I mean, you know, like, was it Turtles in Time has that fucking one-hit kill at the end, and you're just supposed to dump money into it to fucking beat Shredder or whatever. Like, it just sucked, dude. Like, that just sucked. But then we get to a point where, you know, like that genre had gone away enough, and all of the modern attempts to like make it something new, so much of that stuff sucked that by the time something like Castle Crashers came out, it felt like a breath of fresh air. And you're like, oh, this game's awesome. This feels good. It's fun. We haven't played a game like this in a while. And so, you know, like and so you kind of had this revival of the classic form that eventually you see in something like a Streets of Rage 4, for example, or, you know, some of the, all those bad Double Dragon games. Modernizing it makes it something different in ways that, like, those are valid, but it's not scratching the same itch the same way. And so I think that the genre generally, yeah, I think Streets of Rage 4 does some really interesting stuff. Like, people really do like it. Yeah, Mother Russia Bleeds is another kind of interesting example. The most recent Turtles game I thought was really good. I remember not liking Double Dragon Neon. Or was that there was a different Double Dragon game? Maybe, anyway. I remember there being some attempts with the Double Dragon franchise over the years. They just go like, oh boy. Even that one, the one that they started showing, the one that got announced recently, I just look at it and you're like, blech, barf, to quote a better beat 'em up game. I thought the Scott Pilgrim game was pretty shitty. But that has more to do with the vibe of that game than anything else. It just made me want to play River City Ransom. It was just like, man, this is like a shitty, this first level of this is like a really shitty version of River City Ransom. Maybe I should just play River City Ransom instead. That's always the answer. If you're playing a game and you're thinking, man, what if I was playing River City Ransom? You should just do that. That game's pretty good. but yeah, I think a number of those games have come along over the years, and I largely have just not liked that many of them. Yes, Double Dragon 4 had the kind of NES throw, but yeah. So it turns out I don't think I like Double Dragon 4 or Double Dragon Neon. I think there's been just some really rotten Double Dragon games over the recent history. Yeah. I kind of agree with you that the genre, there's not that much to it in the grand scheme of things. And that's okay for what it was in the context of them being arcade games and you know, the skill being, you know, hey, try to figure this out and not, you know, not take any hits because you will have to put in quarters if you do that. Like that ended up being okay. I like Streets of Rage 2 an awful lot. But again, that's a lot of that is on vibes. A lot of that is on how great the soundtrack is and, you know, just the look of the characters, and I like the art style, and you know, it's a great Genesis game, and the soundtrack is one of the greatest soundtracks in video game history. And so like the reasons why I go back and play Streets of Rage 2 now are not necessarily because I love it as a game. I mean, from a balance perspective, it's kind of ridiculous in some ways. You just do the upper over and over again. Like that's a game that I think if I practiced that well enough, I could probably beat that game on its hardest difficulty setting. I don't know that I feel the same way about a lot of beat 'em ups, but I feel like that one I played enough times and got good enough at it that I was like, I bet if I really couldn't get hit, I could maybe still make this happen. But like Streets of Rage 1 was good in its day, but I don't think it's as fun to go back to. And I don't like Streets of Rage 3 very much at all. The characters, the way they made that game look, and but there are like 3 tracks on the Streets of Rage 3 soundtrack that are fucking awesome. That are like as good as the stuff in Streets of Rage 2. But a lot of that soundtrack is not as good either. So it's kind of, yeah, I don't know. Streets of Rage 3, they're stretching their wings a little bit and trying to figure something out about where they could take that game. And they don't quite have the answer there, but you see them trying some stuff with some of the levels that you go like, yeah, all right, there's something to it, but yeah. Playing a lot of Streets of Rage 2 during the early days of the pandemic is what caused me to like finally really truly like get into the KLF, if that makes any sense. I think I've said that before, but yeah. That's gonna do it. And do it for this week. Thanks everybody for coming through and watching the show. And if you were here with us live, watching the Gamescom extravaganza throughout the middle of this. But yes, we'll be back next Tuesday with another podcast. No stream tomorrow. Normally I stream on Wednesdays, but as I said, I am going to go check out some video games without having to go to Germany to do it. So I'm going to give that a shot and see what that's like. I'm going to see what leaving the house is like. Hopefully the baby sleeps tonight because she didn't sleep last night. And if I go 2 nights in a row with no sleep and then have to drive for like an hour in the morning, that'll be bad. That'll be bad for me. Man, last night was maybe the worst she's done. And she's not even really like freaking out, screaming, crying. She is here and there, but she's just not sleeping. She's like awake. And so, you know, ideally so my wife can sleep, which doesn't always work out either. We'll bring her down and put her here, and then I'll sleep down here with the baby, and she's got her first teeth poking through, and yeah, she's doing great. But sometimes stays up all night, which is frustrating. Anyway, have a good rest of your week. I'll be back on Friday. We will rank some 8-bit Nintendo games. Just you, me, and Dune Man Keefzilla. We'll get together with all that sweet Keef. Ugh. And I'll see you then.